All right, these are things that I wish I knew if today was the first day that I was diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea, or if I even thought that I had obstructive sleep apnea. The best way to understand obstructive sleep apnea is to look upstream at what we can consider sort of the master key definition, which I would call sleep disordered breathing. And obstructive sleep apnea is a branch of sleep disordered breathing. It's a main branch, the biggest branch, but beside it, there's another branch, which I would call upper airway resistance syndrome. Since its infancy, sleep disordered breathing has been ridiculed and doubted and contended with by the entire medical community. The traditional and conventional way that we diagnose obstructive sleep apnea, it's exclusionary. It doesn't take into account many other patients that present differently. So here are the things that I wish I knew from the very beginning. This is going to inflame some people, but that's just the way it is. You have to call a spade and call things as they are. And I would say number one, above all, I wish I knew that most people actually don't know what they're talking about in the context of sleep medicine. Of course, physicians are pressured to provide you with a solution, or at least a partial solution, or at least something to keep you busy in the path of finding a solution. If you rewind the clock, it wasn't until 1974 that obstructive sleep apnea was actually characterized and defined as a disease, even though, of course, it existed before that. And the diagnostic criteria that had to be met in those days are much different than the diagnostic criteria that have to be met today. Back then, the typical obstructive sleep apnea patient was basically, a middle-aged man who's overweight and may have like cranial facial abnormality. They had no idea how wrong that really was. Basically, anyone can have sleep disordered breathing. In fact, in my very earliest days of going in and complaining, I was told by the general practitioners in my country, Canada, I'm way too skinny, I'm too young, I'm too healthy, there's no way that I have obstructive sleep apnea. And this went on for a little while. I went back to the clinic multiple times complaining that I couldn't sleep. I was waking up. And I went back and back. It must have been 4 or 5 times that I went to a general clinic, and their treatment recommendation was to take some sleeping pills, to try cognitive behavioral therapy. Like many of you, I just jumped on the internet, punched in my symptoms, did a little research, asked a couple questions, went to a couple forums, recorded myself sleeping. Anyways, eventually I get to my family physician, best doctor I've ever met. He prescribes me a sleep study, take-home sleep study, and lo and behold, when it comes back, drum roll, what did I have? Obstructive sleep apnea. The point is that they completely missed the mark on my diagnosis. But not only that, it's not like I have some obscure sort of peripheral fringe disease or disorder. I mean, the prevalence of sleep disordered breathing in the population is so high that that's what was even more frightening about the entire experience. Anyways, that was years ago, and even between then and now, things have gotten a lot better, but there's still tons of room for improvement, and there's droves of marginalized patients that just aren't getting the treatment that they should be getting. I'm sure there's a lot of patients who will watch us and say, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was treated in the exact same manner. And that's the tragedy of it all. The worst part is how many people don't even know that they have this? And then second off, how many of these people who do believe they have it or think they have it and are right in that thinking are then dismissed, misdiagnosed, mistreated, get the wrong surgery. For some reason, like most sleep physicians and general physicians and ENTs, they're wedded to this idea that CPAP is the only solution. And with that said, in their defense, I do believe that all patients should give CPAP a try and then some. Most patients they'll try CPAP and they will sort of prematurely give up on it because they believe that they have explored all of the options and comfort features and ways of having CPAP treatment delivered. But it's typically not true. And some people are going to be inflamed at me saying that, but I don't care. That's just the truth. A lot of people, they try it day one and it sucks ass, or there is a stigma, or it just doesn't make their sleep better, and then they just give up and they chuck it at the wall. And that's understandable. I get that. But if you can cure this debilitating and consequential disorder with simply wearing a mask on your face while you sleep, I mean, that's ideal. That's gold. And just translate that to, they really do want you to take the least invasive and least problematic route that there is in front of you. And it really is CPAP. However, there's tons of patients that just doesn't work. Another thing I wish I knew right from the start is that there aren't as many options in front of you as you really think. unfortunately, there's predatory practices and commercial juggernauts out there trying to sell you some dog shit, janky, not backed by evidence device or solution. There's so much money to be made in the area of correcting people with sleep disordered breathing, but what comes with that is a hurricane of costly, ineffective, and sometimes even detrimental devices or solutions that patients want to believe will work. Whatever words they may aim at your emotions, be careful. There's lots of garbage out there. You know the story. The other thing I wish I knew is that all these little tiny lifestyle changes, behavioral changes, and psychological changes, and so on, they are obviously helpful, and I encourage everyone to change their life in every possible way to make it healthier. Of course, that'll help with any health complication. I think too many people cling on to this false hope that it's just going to go away. Sleep disordered breathing doesn't typically just go away. For some people, it does go away, but for the vast majority of patients, it's actually quite on the contrary. Sleep disordered breathing is actually just going to increasingly worsen as you age. So you need to deal with this now and not wait on it. Another thing I wish I knew is nasal breathing. Nasal breathing. And the top sleep surgeons and sleep physicians will tell you that you should always be breathing through your nose. Always, whether you're sprinting, sleeping, walking, eating, it doesn't matter. You're supposed to always breathe through your nose. And if you can't breathe through your nose, that might actually be a big reason that CPAP and PAP therapy isn't working for you. Another thing I wish I knew in the beginning was how evidence-based and unscientific the categorization buckets of sleep apnea were. You have mild, moderate, and severe. Mild, moderate, and severe are subjective ideas, and patients hang on to this idea that maybe they're, I'm put in the mild class, and then therefore maybe this isn't a big deal, and I could just do a couple little changes and everything will be better. But that's not true. In fact, there are people who are categorized as mild who symptomatically have much worse time than people who are categorized as severe. Like, you could have an AHI of 7 and subjectively and quality of life wise have a way worse life than someone who has an AHI of 32. Another thing I wish I knew is that everyone is different. You need to stop trying to mimic the outcomes of patient X or patient Y. And you should really start to try to understand your own health and what works for you. Whether it could be stuff you eat or the way you live your life or your PAP settings or the surgical route you take. You should just try to talk to people who are in the know in sleep medicine and create your own individualized patient profile and understanding. Another thing I wish I did was took things extremely seriously from the very beginning and stopped postponing things and kicking the can down the road. I wish I went to the best surgeons and sleep physicians day one. In a lot of countries too, there's already a long enough wait if you just get started today. You can't necessarily walk into a highly specialized in sleep apnea surgeon or sleep physician's office tomorrow. Like in Canada, I'm not even joking. I had to wait over a year multiple times to see an ENT who didn't even remove his hand from the door during our appointment because that's how short they were and how much time they have for you. And by the end of it said, there's nothing I can do for you. You have mild obstructive sleep apnea. But again, we know that doesn't mean anything. And don't take it up with me, take it up with the data. This will be something else that most people are going to painfully receive, but there really is a psychological component to everything. And I think that you shouldn't dismiss your doctor suggesting to you, how much of your bad sleep and bad life and depression and anxiety that may be engendered by this sleep disorder breathing, how much of that do you think is generated by you and your psychology? You need to do everything you can to fight back against this. This is a holistic battle, I think everyone can relate to this idea that if you break your arm, your lifestyle and some of the things that you may have been doing to embolden yourself in the days before, they come to an end. But you kind of have to push that extra effort in, more effort than you were putting in before breaking your arm, so that you can help yourself and give yourself the best chances of fighting this health complication. You today should start eating the right things, exercising, engaging in your spiritual and psychological health, your social health, your occupational health. All these things intertwine. They're all threads to the same tapestry, and you need to not trivialize them or minimize them. They're more important than I think most people believe. And again, this is not something that's delivered very well from our medical system. I'm a firm believer at this point in my life that most health issues and complications can be rectified by proper sleep, proper food, proper physical activity, and all of this stuff is ignored. Just try to get into contact with a doctor who you believe, is digging upstream for the problems. There's this parable in medicine where there's a kid going down a river drowning, and the guy on the shore jumps in, saves the kid, gets to shore, but just as he gets to shore, he sees another kid coming down, and he does this all afternoon, and then eventually he thinks, well, wait, why is this happening? Why is this happening? What a brilliant question, eh? Incandescently bright question. And he goes upstream, and he sees that there's a bridge with a guardrail that's broken, which is where people are falling in. And that's the same way you need to look at your own health, and also how we need to look at health collectively. You need to address the root of the problem. I mean, this is a useless platitude at this point. I mean, it's so cliche to say you need to address the root of the problem. But you go into a medical office today in the first world, in the Western world, and typically they don't do that. So I would say, the redeeming quality of that is actually that there's tons of people on the fringes of the internet who've also been marginalized, who are in the exact same position as you are, who I think could prove quite helpful. It doesn't mean dismiss, the medical professional's advice or never see anyone and just try to get treated by Dr. Google. But the point is that right now, the iteration of sleep medicine globally is absolutely terrible. And there are little pockets of pioneers who, like Stanford Medicine, who understand this stuff very well. And the data is clear. There's a spectrum of sleep disordered breathing, and on one side we have sort of this obstructive sleep apnea group who can sleep through these DSATs but still have all these physiological consequences. And on the other end, there's these people with upper airway resistance syndrome who have this strong compensatory response, who are aroused all night and don't actually DSAT like the typical OSA patient. Another thing I wish I knew is, like, a lot of people don't do this because of stigma. They think that, whatever, the hot girl that they bring home is going to laugh and walk out the door right before they get it on because they have a CPAP machine sitting at the bedside. No one cares. This is another, like, useless platitude cliche, but literally no one gives a shit what you do. Everyone's too busy thinking about themselves. No one cares you have a CPAP. And even if they did, who cares? You can't please everyone. I mean, even Jesus was crucified. So what does that say about the world? It doesn't matter how good you are. Haters are going to hate. Even with that said, if you just still it all down, no one's interested. Everyone has their own problems. Everyone else is too embarrassed about what little thing they have going on with their life. Something that's very frustrating is the fact that, most of these sleep physicians and other physicians, they try to pigeonhole you into one of these sleep severity categories. And in their defense, it is difficult intellectual terrain, but they have to be better at, being decent enough to get out of the way if they don't know what they're talking about. But there seems to be a lot of not that. And, all I guess I have to say more than anything is don't let all that frustration, translate itself into misspent energy. It's going to be a process. You may not find the solution on the first thing you try. Just understand that is where we are. We want to find you solutions and get you a better life because, sleep is... it's inextricable to a good life. Finally, I just want to say to you guys, I know how hard it is and what you're going through. You just got to keep your chin up. I hope you heed the advice that I've laid down for you in this video. There's tons of help out there. There are solutions. You're not crazy. There is something wrong with you. Your sleep is bad and you do need to fix it. Do not despair and start talking to the right people. And obviously subscribe because I need to make AdSense revenue. Thanks. Oh, and just before I close up this video, I'm going to serve you dessert. If you want to look for the right people to talk to in the internet, where I would personally go and where I do still personally go is apneaboard.com. On Reddit, you go to RCPAP or R Sleep Apnea, Sleep HQ. YouTube, there's a couple good YouTubers. The top ones I would say Lanky Lefty and CPAP Reviews. Oh, there's lots of Discord servers too and Facebook groups that are extremely helpful. A lot of these people really do know what's going on. They've gone through this process and they've seen the top doctors. Okay, it's fucking cold now. I'm gonna go home. And one of the most goddamn airplane. Can't he see I'm filming?